Hello everybody and welcome back. Thanks for tuning in to another episode here in the series. My name is Dominic. I'm the host of the Android Factory. This season's been moving along pretty nicely. We've got a reasonable amount of this UI here built out, and we're just going to continue that today here by implementing our cart. As you can see, we have half of it working as far as it knows how many items are in the cart, but we don't really have much of a UI there. So we can go ahead and implement our cart fragment a little bit. We just have a nice to-do here to kind of get some stuff on screen. In the process, I'm going to go ahead and, in air quotes, further this idea of thinking in compose. This mentality works pretty well with Epoxy, what we use to display this entire list and this next list in the cart fragment. And it will translate nicely over to compose as we look to transition maybe this application, just, applications and demos in the future to follow the compose pattern. I'm pretty excited to learn it, so hope you are as well. If you're brand new here, please consider subscribing, drop a like to help me out, and let's just go ahead and jump right into it here. So as we see here, the cart is basically, in this case, it's in an empty state, and then in every other situation here, we're going to have data in there, so we need to display something. I think there is room to have other options available, as in, like, they could edit the quantity and maybe we do some math on how much the total price is going to be based upon the items in the cart. But basically there's going to be two states that I can think of here as far as an empty state and then a data being present state. It doesn't really have the loading state that the all product screen has because we are not doing networking in that perspective. So I'm going to say let's start with a sealed interface for, again, our UI state. And so pretty straightforward, we're going to create a sealed interface named UI state, and we're going to have our two different states in here. We have the empty and the non-empty state. We don't really need anything for the empty state, and then in the non-empty case, we just need the list of products here. If you remember from a previous episode, we have the idea of a UI product, which encapsulates a product, is favorited, is expanded, is in cart, that kind of info here. So maybe we'll update this to be a UI product, but I think we might even have an additional variant of this to kind of display some other information around quantity. Okay, so the next thing that we're going to need to do here is we're going to need to create a view model to kind of capture our data, and again, we are using the Redux pattern. I don't know why it does that every now and then. We are using the Redux pattern, so we do have access to our store and everything like that through our view model. We are using hilt, so again, this should all just kind of fall into place. So we're just going to name this quite simply the cart fragment view model. Again, this is going to @inject constructor here, and this will be our view model. Annotate it with @hilt view model here, and then at the very least we can probably use the products list view model to get at least the store. We'll paste that in there. We'll see this little icon here basically denoting that we're using hilt again, and we're definitely getting the same instance of the store of application state, which is great. That's what we need to work with. I do think that's actually all we need for now, but we are going to add something in the future to make our lives a little easier. But I think for now we're good here. So, we obviously need to create that view model here. It'll be a private val. I'm going to call it view model. You can also use this annotation, view models, and we name it the cart fragment view model, and then we just put the parentheses there. This is basically the same as however we do it in the products list fragment, which is where we declare the type first and then by view models. Here you can just do it all in one shot, saying view model by view models, passing in the type. They're basically the exact same thing, it's just a preference of whichever one you like. I'm starting to like this one more, but again, they accomplish the same thing. Okay, so I was looking at this implementation here and actually thinking we can kind of help ourselves out. So obviously the cart fragment is going to contain basically the same exact items that exist in the products page here, right? And if we take a look at the products list fragment, this is a UI product is created by combining, I think it is at 4 different flows at the moment, and then we have the product filter information here to kind of generate the filter state. So I'm thinking that we can extract out the UI product flow into its own class so that we can reuse that instead of having to copy and paste and then copying all of this different logic here and anything else we want to do after the fact with it. So I think we can maybe rework a little bit of this so that we can make it a little bit more reusable in other areas of the app. So let's go ahead and tackle that now. I'd like to put this in the view model here so that we have access to it. Hilt makes it very easy for us to kind of just add things in. So I'm going to go ahead and create a package inside of our Redux package. And correct me if I'm wrong, but I think, not Redux, sorry. I do think this is where the idea of the reducer kind of comes into play, right? We have our entire overarching store that this is going to continuously grow, but if we want to get it into something that we care about, i.e. a list of UI products, we need to then reduce or basically run this state through some kind of centralized code to then generate what we care about. And in this case, we were basically doing the reducing in place, right? And this is kind of, I guess, the bulk of the reducing. But we're combining a handful of different data points to come up with a list of UI products, right? Or different data points. So we're doing this merging, we're doing this mapping, we're doing this combining. And I believe this is basically the idea of a reducer. So we're going to go ahead and just create the reducer package. I'm going to go ahead and create a new file. Just going to create it named the UI product list reducer. We're going to go ahead, of course, at inject constructor. Let's just go ahead and call this function reduce. This is going to return, let's see, this should be a flow. No, this is going to be, I guess we can make this a live data, to be honest. A list of UI products. This should be given the actual store itself of application state that we care about. And then a lot of this stuff can just kind of copy over a little bit. So I'm just going to copy this whole thing and then we'll kind of change it from there. Okay, so after a little bit of copying and pasting and just changing some variables around, we have the exact same concept here. So in order to create the UI product, we need obviously the product and then favorite, expanded, and is in cart information. We give it the actual store and then we have this thing listen for all those different things it cares about. It has the error handling here, so if the products are empty, we return the empty list. Otherwise, we return whatever it is that we map. I guess we could realistically inline this if we really wanted to. So we'll just go ahead and do that. There we go. And now we're more or less as concise as we can possibly be. Distinct until changed, as live data, all that good stuff. So now we can just feed this reducer a store and we'll get back a live data of a list of UI products. Let's see how that plays within our current implementation. So we're going to go in here, we're going to say private val UI product list reducer, just like that. And then inside of our fragment level, okay, this needs to be a flow. So we're going to go ahead and change that really quickly. This needs to be a flow of a list of UI products, and you'll see why in a moment. And so basically all we have to do is remove the distinct until changed as live data. That will help us out tremendously when we're back inside of this fragment. All right, perfect, and here we are. Sorry to be doing a bunch of jump cuts here, but we'll walk right through it. So we used to have a handful of different things we were combining inside of this fragment. However, now we can take a look at this, and this here just returns a flow of a list of UI products. So, more than half of what we were paying attention to in the fragment level is now paid attention to inside of our reducer. Then we can just simply take that and combine it with our product filter info, and a lot of this logic remains the same. So if we're empty, we then propagate a loading state. Then otherwise here, we can go ahead and actually kind of create our filters like we were doing just before. You see none of this code on the side has changed. And then we just filter our products if we do have a selected filter. And then we just return a success case that has the filters and the actual products there for display here. So this shouldn't impact anything as far as how the application works. I just got to put a comma here. I had to make this public, of course, so that we can access it from the outside, and that's this fragment. I do just want to rerun things just to make sure that we have a sound implementation here. And if so, then we have the UI product list reducer that generates a flow of list of UI products. We can reuse that in basically any view model, in any fragment, anywhere we need to. And so things here look pretty good here. You know, we're favoriting, we added them to the cart, everything's reacting. So this actually looks like it is working as we are intending here. So this is really helpful because now we can just copy this over and use it somewhere else. So we'll start here with the reducer. And we're going to take that into our cart fragment here, just like that. And so now we can actually get access to the UI products. So inside of our fragment here, we can say view model dot UI product list reducer, reduce, where the store is going to equal, let's be verbose here, we'll say store equals view model dot store. And then we can look at this, maybe we'll fit that all in one line. And then we can say, sure, distinct until changed as live data, view lifecycle owner. Sorry, as live data dot observe, and this is where our view lifecycle owner goes. Looks like we can no longer fit that on one line, so really good. And then here we can see we have it dot list of UI products. I do think that we can also map where it, if this is the list of products here, the product list reducer dot reduce, we have our store set to the view model store. We then map that down because that gives us the list of UI products. And basically what we care about on this screen is we only want to filter the ones that are in the cart, right? So this gives us an overall list of basically everything in the store. Then we go ahead and just filter it down to where only this is true, as in elements are in the cart. And then what we get here is going to be a list of UI products where they are already in the cart. So a lot of this filtering is already done. That's really, really convenient. And then let's simply create our view state here by saying if our UI products dot is empty, we're going to create the empty state. Else we are going to create the UI state dot non-empty with our UI products, and everything like that works, right? And then we can go ahead and submit this to an Epoxy controller for actual display. I'm going to take a quick pause here because I just want to thank you guys. If you made it this far in the video, I know I've been jumping around a little bit. Half of the video so far was not something I was prepared to actually do, but I think it made a lot of sense here so that we actually got to see the reducer, see it in action, and kind of, you know, build out that reusability to actually make our lives easier. So I do apologize if the video kind of went a little wacky in the beginning, but now we're going to get to a little bit of the display and specifically look at things from a compose mentality, which is kind of interesting. So smash that like button if you made it this far, and sit tight as we explore some Epoxy compose mentality. Alright, so just went ahead and create a cart fragment Epoxy controller, nothing too fancy. We're going to create this as a typed Epoxy controller, and this is going to be our cart fragment.ui state is what we're going to consume. We have to override our build models, and wonderful. So we're going to go ahead and just handle the different situations. So we can simply say when data, let's say null or is UI state dot empty, we are going to do something surrounding empty state, and then otherwise here I guess we can just say else. I think we actually, it might help us a little bit to also use our for each indexed, and you'll see why in a moment here. So we won't worry about the empty state right now, that should be very quick, but instead we're just going to go ahead and actually build out the Epoxy model for our cart. Okay, if we take a look at our cart item Epoxy model, we have the UI product that we need, the on favorite clicked and on delete clicked. These are just basic callbacks here. And then, you know, normal view binding Kotlin model stuff. If this is confusing, check out a previous episode in the series. And then we just go ahead and bind basically all of our info that we have here. I've gone ahead and created this UI. I don't know if I love it. We'll see how it looks in the actual screen here, but we do have another image. We do have the actual text, and then we do have a delete icon here because obviously these are in the cart, so we want to be able to delete them from the cart. UI might tweak a little bit, but it's going to look something along these lines, at least for now. And then, yeah, so very simply here, when we actually are iterating over our cart item Epoxy models, we can very easily just go like this. We'll have our UI product equal our UI product. We will have the on favorite clicked equal that, and then we will have the on delete clicked also equal that. Obviously we need to handle these different clicks here, but that's okay. We'll get to that. Then we'll give it an ID of the UI product .product.id, and then we'll say add to this, right? So that's a pretty straightforward implementation for Epoxy here, adding in the different models that correspond to whatever we have inside of our non-empty state. Okay, very good. The other thing that I've done off camera is I've created something, I believe it's called cart empty epoxy model. I think this only requires one on click here, and we can very easily implement it like so. We're going to have to, of course, add an ID, and we'll just call this the empty state, and then we will add to this. Obviously, again, we have a to-do here, and I think this on-click will start to make sense in a second when you see it. However, we just need to use this epoxy controller now. It's ready to go, at least for the bare bones version. And we do just need to use it inside of our fragment here. So we're going to create an epoxy controller. Is going to be an instance of that. Then we have our binding .epoxy RecyclerView set controller, our epoxy controller. And then, quite simply, we will have the epoxy controller .set data, and it requires the view state that we had just created right here. So anytime any of this stuff changes in the store, you know how this works. We'll generate a new view state, again, only filtered by the products that are in the cart. And then we'll just submit that view state to the epoxy controller. It looks very similar to the previous screen. Okay, so as we flip over to the cart, this is the empty state that it created. It's very simple, as you can tell here. And this is the on-click that we'll need to kind of interact with. This is just going to be navigating to basically this tab programmatically, but we'll get to that maybe in the next episode or something along those lines. We can go ahead and add a few products in here, so we have 3. And if we go ahead and click over, yeah, so the UI isn't beautiful, but it's a good start. If we go ahead and favorite this shirt, when we go back over here, we do see that it is now favorited here. So we do know that all of this data is connected properly. Obviously the spacing is an issue, but we're gonna go ahead and solve that pretty soon. Okay, so I think the first thing that I want to solve for right now is the vertical spacing issue, right? As we can see here, each one of these elements just basically starts where the previous one ends. And there are different ways that we can do it, right? You could put padding inside of the actual view itself. You could put, thanks to Epoxy, you can specify the item spacing attribute, and that would space these items correctly as well. But again, we're going to look at things in a little bit more of a composed mentality, where our UI that we care about, or the UI that we're working with here, takes up the full width of the screen. And as we can see here with the Epoxy implementation, that is true. So we have this entire canvas to work with basically, but we want to add views in such a way that it makes it look like the UI that you would be expecting here. So I think the first thing that we're going to want to do here is actually go ahead and declare a spacing element. So we're going to go ahead and create a new layout resource file. We're going to name this an epoxy model vertical space. We're going to leave it as a constraint layout, but actually I think we can quite easily change that. I believe there's an element in here. Yeah, I think it's just called space. So because this one is going to be a vertical space, I guess we could reuse it for both vertical and horizontal, but for now we're just going to use a vertical space. We have the layout width of match parent, and however the height is going to be set to, let's just go with a whopping 0 dp. I think inside of our generic epoxy package would be a pretty good place to add this. We're going to have, this is going to be the vertical space epoxy model. And basically what we're going to need to do here is we're going to need to programmatically modify our space. And so we can simply do something like this. We can set the layout params on the root element to be the view group layout params. The first argument here is going to be the width, and then the second argument is the height. We've declared the width to be match parent, but you can see how we can just very easily swap this out to make this just any kind of space that we care for. And then the height here is defined in the constructor of our data class here. We just annotated it with @dimension_unit equals px for just good measure. This does require, I guess the layout params constructor, I believe, requires a pixel measurement, not a DP, density independent pixel. So we're just going to have to calculate this ahead of time, but that's not a big problem here. We can very easily just now start using this, and let's see if it works. So we're going to go ahead and copy the vertical space epoxy model. We'll head over here, and let's just use something ridiculous here. We can go ahead and add it in. Well, adding it in is not the ridiculous part, but let's go ahead with 24.22px. This is an extension function that I've created. We have the 2dp and the 2px. It's pretty straightforward here. You can just find this all over the internet. Vertical space epoxy model 24px. We'll give it an ID of something like space_index. This is why we did for each indexed. And then we could just simply go add to this. Now, rerunning things here, we should see a 24dp space in between all of our items. And rerunning it here, obviously we're not going to have anything in the cart, so we'll just go ahead and add a few. And as we bounce over, yeah, so it's not beautiful, but it does now provide that separation, right? We can see that there is a little bit of separation there. Yeah, so, a normal value here might be something like 16. That, is a reasonable separation there. And yeah, never mind, that does look actually pretty good. So now we can see that there's a little bit of separation from the vertical side of things. Obviously, we don't have the horizontal separation from the edge of the screen, which will really start to bring it together. However, I also think that the screen can benefit from a little bit of divider usage here, right? So basically, if we can do something that looks like if our index does not equal 0, i.e. the first element, we can go ahead and add in a divider epoxy model. This is something that I've already created, and as we can see here, it has horizontal and vertical padding. We'll go ahead and just give it again an ID of saying divider _index, add to this. Let's just go ahead and run it here and see how it does look with just that basic implementation. Adds a few things in here. Okay, so we do have a little bit of a separation now, which is also kind of nice. Clearly, we only have the space on this side of things, which is totally fine. As in, we only have the space after or before each element, and then we basically add the divider, and then we have our cart there. So realistically, it would probably be best if we did something like translated that to 8, and then copied it and put it after this if statement as well. So we'll get 8dp before and 8dp after the particular divider. Now the divider appears to be in the middle of the screen here. So you can start to see that it starts to kind of come together here, right? It starts to actually look like a little bit of a screen. And if we go ahead and modify let's go with the horizontal padding here. Go with also 16.2px, and let's see how that looks really quickly. All right, looks like our implementation of horizontal padding did not do anything here. We do use the update padding function here, and I'm thinking we might need to change that around. Taking a look at our epoxy model divider, if we go ahead and set padding here, let's say 12dp, we see that nothing happens. Might be difficult to see, but the second we apply a margin instead, you can actually start to see that this little line here, which is just simply a view of height 1dp with a rounded drawable background set to a certain color, actually starts to move away from the edges, which we want it to. So it looks like we're going to have to update the margin here in this epoxy model. All right, and I think we can do it here with the update layout params. We can see there's a set margins function, and it takes left and then top and then right and then bottom. So we can just oscillate horizontal, vertical padding for each one that we go ahead and add in there. We're not going to use the update padding because that did not work. So I guess margin is what we need to do. The only thing in the update layout params that's worth noting is in order to get the margins modification ability, you need to specify the viewGroup.margin layout params. well, let's change around all of this that says padding here to just say margin. Wonderful. We'll go over here. This will say horizontal margin instead. Rerunning things here, we go ahead and get what we were expecting, and wonderful. So we do have a nice little separation here. We can provide the vertical margin if we really want to have some spacing, but for right now it does look like we have a pretty good deal as far as just worrying about the horizontal margin. Go ahead and clean this up here by simply just cutting this out and instead calling add vertical styling, which is a function right here that we went ahead and added. Sure, I guess we can pass in the index that we need here to make everything work. That shouldn't be an issue because we have it here. I do think that we need to actually modify this. So top space, and then this will say bottom space index. We don't want to reuse the same IDs here, right? We don't want to have two vertical space epoxy models with the same ID, and previously they were. And in this case, we're going to just be fine here. So we basically wrap the divider epoxy model with our two different vertical spacers. Rerunning things should yield us the same result here. So we go ahead and add a few items to our cart. We take a look at them, and that looks good. I do want to just double check how it looks with just two. There's just one divider, wonderful. And then if we go that way, wonderful, there's no divider anywhere. So I think this UI is reacting every way we want it to. The last thing that we need to do here is add in a little bit of margin, a little bit of space between the walls here of the phone. I'm sure you can guess how that would go, so give me a second. And quite simply here in the cart item epoxy model, updating it to take in the horizontal margin here. We've added in exactly what we've used before as far as the dimensions for the horizontal margin, and then we just simply, again, update our layout params. Let's see how it reacts. And if we flip over here, great. Now we have different items on screen here. We have a handful of different items here, although it might look like there's just one or two things going on here. We have that vertical space to give us a little bit of extra room, the divider to go ahead and kind of separate things a little bit further, and who knows, we may change things further, we may leave it, we may add certain things in, but the idea here that I wanted you to start thinking about is to not necessarily take everything at face value here, and not just assuming that the only way that you can get certain things on screen or the certain padding and separation between items has to be done within the view holder or the epoxy model itself. From my understanding, Compose kind of works that way, but also being able to add in different views here, right? The space element and then a divider and then another space element and then another item and then repeat, that is kind of a little bit more of the Compose mentality. So it's adding in views for things that I guess you didn't really consider or you wouldn't really consider adding views in for. Got a nice little touch feedback here. Obviously that doesn't work. So there's still a little bit of cleanup here. Obviously the screen is not done, but we do see that there is some info on this screen. And then I think we could probably get away with adding some kind of total or some kind of, information about how much your cart is going to cost you. But obviously we can build that out in the future here. I really just wanted to get you to think about a UI a little bit differently than you may be used to. And I think, at least from my perspective, that does help when it comes time to translate over to Compose. So yes, Compose is on the horizon. I'm not going to make any promises when, because there's a lot going on right now between this series and work and life in general and whatnot. But have no fear, we are going to continue implementing this epoxy controller. We are going to continue building things out here. There's even ability to sign in and whatnot. So we have a lot ahead still. I'd love to hear how I'm doing in the comments. If there's any requests for specific things, I'd love to hear you out on them and whatnot. But I know we've covered a lot in this episode. It might be a little bit longer. I do apologize for that. But if you did stick it out till the end, I definitely appreciate that. Go ahead and drop the secret code 1111 in the comment section to let me know that you made it all the way through. Thanks anyway. I'll catch you guys in the next one. Have a good day.